Hello and welcome to the Wagtail podcast. And today I have Mel with me. So, Mel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mel, and I am a mom of two, a wife to a good friend, and I live on Vancouver Island in Canada, but actually met Brienne over in England when I lived there for 14 years. And I am building a business at the moment, and it's all around positive psychology and this whole topic of resilience and wellness. So I'm super excited to chat about that with you and see where we go with it.
Excellent. I'm excited to talk to you because just you have this creativity and kind of entrepreneurial kind of mindset and like this positive go get it, go try it attitude. So that's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you today.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's learned is what I would say. We could all have that. And it takes a lot of practice to get to the point where you can really think of things as an experiment in life. So
yeah. Okay, so we'll just kick off with the first question, which is
sure.
What is your own definition of wellness and resilience?
Right. So wellness and resilience. I think of it like this. So our usual kind of medical model way of looking at it is sees people as either you're in the negative and we support them to get up to the neutral part of wellness, right? And I think what's really missing often is that neutral to flourishing section. And how do we support people to really get up to flourishing where they're being the best version of themselves? And resilience for me is learning the skills and the approaches and the beliefs and everything that goes with it that enables you to do that, so that when you fall, because you will, because life throws us stuff that we will have to work through, we can bounce back better than we were before if we prepared ourselves in a variety of different ways. And yeah, so the wellness is the neutral to flourishing for me, or it's that whole continuum really.
Yeah.
And we sit anywhere on that, and it's not like we sit in one place forever. We go back and forth. Mm-hmm. And resilience is about really how you bounce when things happen and the skills we can do to support ourselves to do that.
Cool. That word flourishing, now to me, that is the epitome of positive psychology, that kind of flourish. So I've read Martin Seligman's book, Flourish, and I'm just always in awe of his work, actually. So I don't know, so this is just an ad hoc question here, but how would you define that flourish word as well? Because it's not one that gets used that often, really, flourishing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting word. And I think for me, flourishing is being the best version of yourself. So you wake up, and that doesn't mean that, like some people think when we talk about positive psychology, that you have to be positive all the time. And it's the same with flourishing. It doesn't mean that you're like happy all the time. It's not the same as happiness. It's more about, well, you're likely happy more than if you weren't. It's more about giving yourself the permission to feel all the feels, to be human, and to just be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, I love that. That whole be the best version of yourself is kind of exciting to me, because I always feel there's so much opportunity within that.
Yeah, definitely. And opportunity is a great word. Opportunity and possibility is one of my favorite words, actually. So it's being able to see what's possible. And when we're flourishing, we can do that. When we're struggling, and when we're struggling, it's hard to see past into the possibility, the realm of possibility. But when we can get ourselves to a certain point and really support ourselves through that process to get to a certain point, then we can see beyond into the possibility, which is an exciting place to be.
Yeah, for sure. So can you tell everybody a little bit about your own personal journey towards wellness and resilience?
Yeah, it's been an interesting one. So as I mentioned, I lived in England for 14 years. I'm originally from Canada, as you can tell by the accent, but we moved there for 2 to 3 years officially, and we stayed for 14, right? So then we decided after having our second child, and right before our first child, our daughter, was going to be going into kindergarten in Canadian years, because it's a little later than UK, that was the time that we wanted to move back to Canada. And having a second child was hard enough on its own. And it was like, if anybody's thinking about having a second child, it's not like 2 times as hard. It's like at least 20, I would say. And it's not because of the child, though he has very large, loud feelings. It's more about the fact that it started to get me reflecting on and thinking, like, I was triggered way more easily. I wasn't triggered almost at all with my first child, right? Okay. But I couldn't meet the needs of both all the time. And then I started having all my stories and beliefs about that, and wanting to people please, and wanting to, all of these beliefs of what I should be able to do, right, started to come out at that point in time. And things kind of started to get more challenging from there on out, I would say. So we had a couple years in the UK, and at the end of that 2 years, we had decided that we were going to move back to Canada a few months earlier, but we ended up moving. The plan was April 2020. So I imagine you can remember what happened in April 2020, right? Like, pandemic. All right, crap, right? What are we going to do? So we moved in March. In the end, we moved a month earlier than planned. Right. And it was an interesting adventure, I would say. The actual journey over was crazy. It was like going from a world where masks and all those things didn't exist to entering Canada, where like the kids were like, parents were telling their kids not to go too close to mine in the airport, and like everybody's in masks, and some people were in full of space suits because we didn't know what was going on back in the world back then, right? But then we came here, and even after we lived with my parents-in-law for 3 months, but we didn't really know anybody else other than some family that were on Vancouver Island, so they were in Vancouver. My family's in Alberta. My dad was just diagnosed with leukemia at the time. We didn't know anybody here. It's a pandemic, so nobody really wants to talk to you. So things just started to go really downhill for me, and I stopped doing my work. So I had started a business up in the UK, and I just like closed it down when I left, and I didn't feel like I had any purpose or anything, honestly, when I came here, other than like decorate my kids' rooms and just enjoy the like everyday life as much as I could. But eventually we got to this point where I knew I had to do something, because I didn't feel like myself anymore. Mm-hmm. And my daughter was finally into school, and my son was still at home with me, but I ended up finding the positive psychology course through the Flourishing Center, it's called.
Oh, no.
Flourishing. Yeah, it's based out of the US, and they're amazing there. I highly recommend them. And so I did the certificate in applied positive psychology, which is a 9-month course. And while the topic was definitely fascinating and I loved it in so many ways, what I knew was I wanted to go on that growth journey with other people, and I needed that connection. And I think for me, that's like the biggest part of wellness and building resilience, is finding a community of people that you're like can talk about real stuff with, more than just the small talk. So this course was, for me, the space where I've met some incredible people along the way who I've never met in person, and yet they're like some of my best friends now. And that's just, that's what happens, I think, when you go on a growth journey with other people at the same time. And then I did my coaching qualification, and that helped even more, because not only did I get to coach, but I got lots of coaching from all these people practicing. So I was able to work through like what I didn't even realize was there was all these emotions around anger and grief, and not having closure because we left so fast and didn't get to like say goodbye to everybody. And I planned on being back there in like 6 months when we left. I was like, I'm going to go back. We're going to run some events. We're going to see all these people. No, first time I went on an airplane was like 2 weeks ago, and it was only for 45 minutes since the pandemic, right? So that's kind of my journey of this, like going really downhill and then coming out through community and my love of learning, essentially combining together and allowing me to grow. And now that person you just described that experiments and has this kind of entrepreneurial spirit is back again, where it honestly wasn't for those couple of years. And I think it's I'm pretty open about that story and the hard times that were there, because so many people don't talk about it. And then they look at someone that like looks happy and like whatever online and is taking these risks and thinks like they couldn't do that. But I couldn't do it either at one point. And it was a journey to get to where I am.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I wonder if I can ask you about a couple of things in your story.
Of course.
The first one I want to ask about is all those shoulds and triggers, because you know what? I'm not a parent, and when I really think about it, there's a reason I'm not a parent, and it's because actually, look, I see it's a full-time job. I see how hard it is, and I feel like I would be one of those parents that just was anxious and worried all the time. So I can understand only a minuscule imagined part of being a parent, and combined with being a parent and having usual worries, there's also the shoulds, and usual people have shoulds as well, but when you combine the two, that must be quite intense, because the shoulds are no longer just yours, they involve people you're responsible for. And I don't know if you could say a little bit more about that and how it hit you and how perhaps you got out of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really, really good point. I think the shoulds are I love the phrase, don't should all over yourself, right? Like there's such a big part, and it's a great phrase. And it's easier said than done, right? Because we all have shoulds, and that's like we've been culturally ingrained into having these. And I think especially as women, and even more so as moms, we are told what we should do, what we should feel, that we should be able to do it all. And actually, like, we don't have a village the same way that people used to have a village, and there's no way we can do it all. So of course we're dropping the ball sometimes. Of course we're getting frustrated at our kids sometimes. Of course we're like, feeling all these things. And I think it's really dangerous with shoulds, because what they turn into is shame. And and then we hold it in because the comparison bug like shouts when you become a mom, and you start looking at all the other moms and all the other kids, especially when they're really young, who maybe are growing at a different rate or sleeping a few more hours or whatever it might be. And there's so many books telling us what we should do, often not science-based, by the way, that it gets in our heads. And then when you add in this cultural expectations that we should be the matriarch, we should be able to take care of everybody else and put ourselves last, it just starts to go downhill. And I think for me, like that really showed up. I have this really specific memory in my mind when my daughter was 3 when my son was born. And we had this big chair that I used to nurse my son on. So he was probably only a couple months old or something. And my 3-year-old, who was like the dream child before this, right? Like that's what people called her. And I was like, she's still hard, but she was though, like looking back. Yeah. But she was just, I just want your attention. I want you to give everything you can, Mom, which I used to be able to do. And she would climb on my back while he was nursing and falling asleep. And I was just like, I don't what to do, right? Because like I'm trying to nurse him and his needs are different than her needs, and I can't meet them both in that moment. And that's where the shame came in, right? And that can be a proper spiral. And I didn't talk to anybody about it. I never talked to anybody about that for that first like 2 years, I would say. And that's where it was hard. And what got me out of it, honestly, is to start to talk about it with people. Because in fact, I was just reading and writing about this earlier, is Brene Brown has some amazing work on shame. Yes. And I can't remember the exact wording of the quote she said, but basically shame can't handle it if you speak of it. So the way to get rid of it is to talk about it, basically. And that's what I ended up doing, was just to start to talk about it with people that I trusted. And honestly, sometimes with people that weren't that close to me, but would understand because they were in a similar situation.
Okay.
Because then I could just walk away afterwards. It was almost less scary in some ways, but yeah, these shoulds are a really, really big part of who we are as people, unfortunately. And I think of them as stories that we tell ourselves. And once we can become aware of the stories that we're telling ourselves, then we can decide whether they're actually serving us and decide whether we can change them. Well, we can change them, whether we want to change them, because it's hard work.
It takes a lot of practice, right?
Oh, yeah.
How did it feel, considering shame is a huge thing and you'd kept it in for 2 years? How did that first conversation go? Like, how were you feeling?
Yeah. Honestly, I can't even remember exactly who the first person was. And the feeling was I just probably looked like when I'm vulnerable, I just cry. Like, that's just what I do. So I probably didn't even say a lot of words. I just like, okay. Yeah. And not that exact moment that I can reflect upon more specifically, but it's the one around the feelings. I think that all came out because I held it for so long, that shame, that moving, the anger, the grief, that it was all just sitting in there. And then I had a coaching session with my teacher, and she was the one that like just asked me some really good questions. And I was like, oh shoot, this is what's happening here. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, and it hurts. And you recognize that that's what it is. And then you have to find a way to have self-compassion now that you know about it, and not beat yourself up for the fact that having that. So I had to kind of sit on that for a while. And I developed this habit of, I call them compassion showers. So like water is a big thing in my life. I love, if I can get in water, on water, ideally my head goes underwater, then I just feel this sense of like, just peace, I guess. So I get in the shower, and every time I'm in the shower now, it's become a really good habit. Before I get out, I have to let myself just close my eyes and stand under it and breathe and savor and think compassion, essentially. So that's a sidetrack, but that's one of the things I did to kind of feel compassion for all those big negative quote unquote feelings I was happening. And then I went for a run, and I ran as fast as I possibly could. It probably wasn't very fast, but it felt fast. And kind of let it come out. And it was a really fascinating experience. The first time I'd done it in a way that I was so aware of. Because usually it just kind of, it's not quite as intentional as that, I would say, normally.
Yeah.
But it worked. And it's not like it was then completely disappeared, but it had definitely moved through in a way that it wasn't as strong anymore. Yeah.
That's amazing. That it's amazing how that connection with somebody else can bring it out of you. And then, because it's not just connection with other people, is it? That connection that you had with somebody else to bring it out with you, forced this connection to yourself.
Yeah.
That you had to face.
Yeah, 100%. I'll bring another Brene Brown quote up because it's my favorite one, which is the Atlas of the Heart. She says it actually in the current HBO series, but she talks about you can only be as connected to others as you are to yourself. And that's like, right? Because we often feel disconnected, and we go and seek others when actually what we really need is to really connect to ourselves, and others can help us do that too. Yeah. It's kind of I just have a movement for it. It goes back and forth like that. Yeah.
Cool. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because this is one of my favorite topics, and you mentioned it, was meaning, and how important it is to have a purpose or have some kind of meaning. in your life. So, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, it's one of my favorite topics as well. And I think it's ridiculously important. And we all as humans, it's not just, I think, like the science shows, we all as humans naturally we naturally have a purpose. We just don't always necessarily connect with what that is. And something really interesting I learned about it is that the way we often think about it is in a very scarcity kind of outlook to it. So we think, I need to find my purpose. Like it's out there somewhere. I have to find it and bring it in, when in fact, purpose is already there. It's already in there. And we just have to kind of like bring it about and understand it and see it, because it's hiding sometimes beneath all those other feelings. So for me, when I moved, it was hiding beneath all of these other ridiculously large emotions of all sorts of things that I couldn't see myself anymore. I couldn't see that purpose. I couldn't see that mattering. I didn't feel like I mattered because I didn't feel like I had a purpose at that point. And there's a real connection between purpose and mattering. And yeah, so I think purpose is really, really amazing and really, really important. And I have a tool that I actually use with people in my work that amazing coach named Nick Heap taught me. And it gets your purpose into 3 words. And I think mine's behind me. Oh no, it's not there right now. Oh, here it is. Here's mine. No, 2 words, mine is. So it's going to be backwards on your screen, but risking love is my purpose, essentially. So that's different than like the job title that I might have or the business that I'm running. But it's more about the fact that we all have something that we are designed and here on this earth to give to the world. And it's also usually the thing we also need the most, right? So for me, love is the obvious part of that statement. I need that connection and support and vulnerability and growth and everything that goes alongside love. And risking is all about the vulnerability, the adventure, the growth, trying new things, and to do the hard thing in relationships, you know, like get in there and risk the love component, even when you actually just want to fight. So,
is that an easy or quick activity to describe to people now, or is it more?
Oh, I could totally describe it. Yeah. And you can try to do it yourself, or it'd be better with a partner that has some good kind of coaching, questioning, just open-ended questions for you. But essentially what it is you do a common practice in positive psychology. One of the interventions they do is tell us about a time when you felt your best. Right? And then you just share a story. And the act of sharing that story gets you in an amazing state of mind because you're really proud and you're in that moment. Your mind doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination, right? So you're in that moment and you're feeling everything and you're sharing this story of when you felt your best. It might be a specific moment or it might be a kind of moment in time. And then you basically we look at that and we make a list of 2 things. So we make the ing words, the action words, and we make the nouns essentially on the other side. So risking would have been one, love would have been one of my others, and I would have had a list of like 30 or so under each of those, that just things that through that story I picked up on. Like mine would have been adventure and friendship and hugs, because I was thinking about a camp where we hugged a lot. And then we take those 2 lists and you try to come up with like you pick your favorite 3 from either side, and then you bring that down and you've got 3 and 3, and then you somehow try to bring that into 2 words, or some people like to have a little mini word in the middle. And it's amazing when in the right mode and when really kind of looking for that purpose, this can be really, really powerful to just be able to give it that word. I worked with another lady who's, unmasking smiles was hers. And I was like, yes, like, please go and do that in the world. Like, the world needs you to go unmask smiles in whatever way you want to do that. It doesn't matter, right? And there's some, yeah, really beautiful ones that have come out of it.
I really love that activity. And I'm going to do that because you know what I love about it is that some people think that purpose has to be this big, huge, massive thing. And then there's a lot of pressure to get to this place that is most likely unattainable anyway, because you think it's got to be huge. But the way you're describing this activity can be interpreted in different ways, and you can use it in different ways. And I love that.
And I think of it as a lens almost. So like, if I want to make a decision about my life, like, do I want to pursue something? I think, well, will it help me risk love? And if it doesn't, then it's probably not appropriate for me because I'm not going to get a lot out of it. Or will it give that to me? Either one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would see that as kind of similar to values, which are guiding your decisions and guiding where you're going and who you want to be.
Yeah, and your values definitely come out in this. I think that's what it ends up doing. So yeah, I think it's really beautiful because it's almost less tangible, but more in the same way, right? So like, it's not a specific job or a specific role that's actually going to shift.
Yeah.
It's something that anything could fit within, and it's whatever lens you need to give it. And that, like, those words are not going to mean the same to you as they do to me, right? Because it's my thing, and how I got, the process of how I got to that is always going to be mine, essentially. Yeah.
I think that's awesome, and I hope everybody listening like does that activity, because I think that's really great. And I love how you've got it kind of like you got something made up.
Yeah, I did that actually. So craftiness is like, I actually did a lot of that when I was not feeling as well, but I've filled my time with other things at the moment, but I do that. Yeah, this is just my wood burning was my most recent attempt.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
At things. I love craftiness. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So can you share any tips or strategies with people about, how you can support a wellness and resilience journey?
Yeah. So I think the most obvious one, which you've already talked about, is community, and really surround yourself with people who will support you on a growth journey. And I was going to say not question you, but question you in a good way, as opposed to like a judgmental way. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And look into positive psychology and everything to do with it, because it's amazing. Martin Seligman has that book, as you mentioned, and that's great. And the topics within it that kind of stand out to me is things like savoring is one of them, for example. So taking a moment every day to savor something. For some people, that's the easiest, to just like make sure you have no distractions, you're eating your food really slowly and thinking about where it came from and how did that come about. Like, it's amazing if you actually think about it in detail. Or for me, sometimes I have these moments where I look at my kids, I'm like, how is it possible that you were created? Like, how's that actually possible? Right? Like, because it just like is mind blowing to me. Or it might be as simple as so savoring being one of them. Another one being so I'm going to say gratefulness is a big one, and it's talked about a lot, and it's a bit of a touchy one for me, I would say, which is an interesting, I think there's this, you should be grateful, going back to the shoulds. I think there's this expectation that sometimes people put stories around it with, and I did for a long time. Like, you should be grateful for that. And then if I complain, that's what people would say or think, right? Yeah. So I'm still on that journey to shift that to being able to practice gratefulness in a way that feels really positive to me. And for me, actually, I don't use the word very often. So a little practice that you can do around the table with your family, kids or not, is what's 3 good things that happened today, and pointing out the good, because naturally human beings notice the bad. We notice negative. That's a natural human behavior. It's fine. And we have to put more conscious effort into noticing the good. So by pointing out the good, we feel better about it, basically, and we are able to notice it. But take that one step further and say 3 good things and how you made them happen. How were you involved in making them happen? And I think that's really powerful. It's amazing to do with kids. Get them, like my 4-year-old can't quite get his head around it, but my 7-year-old's getting there. She's like, oh, like, how is that? And I really like that one. We fall into the habit. It might be a new one that I have to.
I've got these post-it notes in the shop, right? And just at the top it says the best thing about today. And I've started a best thing about today wall in the shop, right? So customers that come in, I'm asking them if they want to contribute to the wall and write something down on the post-it to put on the wall. And
awesome.
the kind of conversations that come out, you know, some people look at me and they're like, you want me to write what? And some people, it just sparks this nice conversation between them and who they came in the shop with or with me, and it's amazing. I really
I think that is amazing. And the confused looks are more related to the fact that we don't talk about this enough. We don't talk about what's good enough, right? And they might be like, well, I don't know, like I'm having a horrible day, nothing's good. And then, but even if they probably walk out of the shop thinking about it, even if they didn't do it, like, what was good? There must have been something good, right? I think that's an amazing like experience that you're giving people by when they walk in that shop.
Awesome. I'm hoping to fill a whole wall, hopefully.
Awesome. Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think that that's the way we should be starting conversations. So like in Canada, we say, how are you all the time when we see someone, but we don't really want an answer. Good, good. In England, it's like, y'all right? Yep. Right? And it's like, what does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything, right? Where what if we started and when we saw people like, hey, what's good? And they just tell us, oh, I just like saw this funniest thing around the street over there, right? Like, and it would just be a quick, and our moods would be so much better if we were entering the world that way. Yeah.
I agree.
So that's my invitation to everybody listening is go ask someone what's good.
Yeah. I'm going to do that tomorrow.
Awesome.
It'll be good. So I totally hijacked your story, but what else?
That's good.
What other kind of tips and strategies?
So those are some nice tools and they're very like positive thinking, right? But I honestly think one of the biggest things to know in order to help ourselves flourish and be well is to start to build an awareness of our thoughts. And how are you talking to yourself in your head? Because it's probably like way worse than you would ever say to anybody else, right? Like, would you say this to your best friend? If no, then let's shift it, right? So like noticing it first, that's the first step, is that awareness. Like, okay, that's probably not going to serve me very well right now to tell myself that I'm a horrible mom or to whatever, right? And then know that it's possible to change the beliefs that we're having around that, and that it's hard, but it's possible. And the awareness is that first step. And once we know the belief that is causing our thought and action, so they call it like, I can't go into, it would take me an hour to go into all the detail, but they call it the ABCs of CBT. So very much like you have an action, something that you perceive as negative has happened. We usually jump straight to like I lost my job. Oh, I'm a horrible person. I'm never going to find a job again. But there's a belief in between there that's causing us to feel that, right? And the belief might be that that nobody really liked me at work. And let's just go with that, right? That might be the belief that you have there. And it could go even deeper than that. And then that's causing our reaction. But if we just pay attention to what those beliefs are instead of our reactions, but be like, why am I reacting that way? What do I actually believe? Then we can start to be like, okay, is it serving me to have that belief, or can I shift it? And shifting takes time and practice, but awareness is that first step. And it just helps us to manage our triggers, because we all have them.
Yeah,
really.
and those beliefs, they're so integral to our feeling of self-worth. And it really is important to kind of shift it if we can, I think.
It's so important. Our feelings of self-worth, yeah, for sure. And like around parenting, it comes up all the time, right? So like often a trigger is related to your child not listening to you. So that's one of my triggers, for sure. Right. And I think most parents have that trigger. So if I speak and my child just pretends I didn't even say anything, then I'm like, like, listen to me, right? But the belief in there is ingrained in me, and I want to not believe it, and I'm working very hard on it, because of like all sorts of generational ways of parenting that have happened in like I shouldn't say all over the world, but definitely in the cultures I've been in, is that children should listen to their parents no matter what they say, right? And I'm like, well, actually, I should listen to my kids, and like I want to feel heard, and I want my kids to, I would love my kids to listen, but that's not a hard set in stone belief that needs to be there in that moment, right?
Yeah.
That's an authoritarian kind of look to it, where actually if I changed and shifted the belief to something that was more like, we're equal parties in this relationship, and listening is really important to me. So I might respond in a way that's like, oh, how can I help them to see that listening is important in this situation, which is a totally different way to react, right?
And it's like a neutral way, because with those generational parenting, there's always been like an attachment of good or bad. If you didn't listen, then you're automatically bad, right? And then sometimes it becomes a moral thing, and then it gets even more ingrained, because you don't want to make somebody else feel that, or so then you just, but what you're describing is a much more neutral, collaborative, compassionate way.
If we just brought compassion and curiosity into all our relationships, we would be so much happier as a world. Just those two things, compassion and curiosity. I think, the world would be a much different place if everybody had the ability to, we all have the ability, if everybody made the choice to bring those about more and more every day.
I agree. And some of those things are things I've just been learning recently, actually, like I've only just recently, and you might have something to add on this topic, actually, like let's love, right? I've only just recently come round to the topic and the idea of, actually, I do love everybody. Like before, it was like, I love my family and I love my husband. But you know what I've been learning is that love shouldn't be like a word that you keep just to those people. There's nothing wrong with telling people you love them and they're not in that tiny group. Is and that is something that's growing in me just recently, but I'm embracing it, and actually I'm loving it.
And that's such a fascinating topic, and obviously like it's part of my like purpose statement there, but at the same time it's something I've always struggled with, which is almost why it is that, right? Like especially expressing it is very, very challenging. I didn't grow up in a huggy lovey kind of family, right? We do now more than we ever did when we were kids. And love is universal. And it was actually like a cultural thing for me in England to the fact that like everybody hugs when they first see each other. I'm like, oh, okay, this is nice. Instead of just like shaking a hand or something. and or just waving and doing nothing, which is much more awkward. So it's a much better system over there. But also like the like X's and O's, like hugs and kisses at the end of messages and stuff. I'm like, I'm not gonna hug and kiss. Why would I write that? Right? But it is an interesting, whether you like those two things or not, it's about the fact that it was challenging me to think about how I was expressing love, essentially. But love can be vulnerable. Love is vulnerable. And that's part of the reason why we don't often allow ourselves to express it.
And I think why I brought that up was, for me, love is related to compassion. So the more compassion I understand in other people, that everybody's just trying to be human and trying to survive, then I can let go of small irritations that I have about people, because they're just humans trying to survive. And that compassion then leads to that love much easier.
Hugely so. And I think, you know, it's the, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like it's exactly what we need right now in a world that is very divisive on a lot of different topics. And compassion and empathy and being able to see that people are just people trying to do their thing, it keeps us away from judgment. And it's when we get into judgment that we get divisive. And at the end of the day, I saw this amazing video on Facebook that really showed this. It was this experiment someone had done where they brought two people into a room that had extremely different values, like on a very divisive topic. And like one was like about abortion or something. It was like yay and nay, like very strong opinions, right? And you see the videos of their opinions about that beforehand. Then you get them in a room and they keep doing all these activities where they have to work together to like achieve something. And then near the end, after they've built a bar together and have a drink in front of them, they're shown the videos of what the other person said about that topic. And their faces are like, what? Right? Oh, wow. And then they have to make a choice about whether or not to stay in the room and have a beer with that person. And all of them chose to. And whether they would again afterwards, I don't know. But it was a fascinating experiment of like, we're all just human, and they were all human that whole time until they realized they had a different belief on one very strong topic and core belief of theirs. And I think I bring that up just because I think it's a nice example of that divisiveness only happens when we then choose, like they chose to stay and talk over a beer, right? And so they said, okay, I'm going to put my judgment aside for a second because I really like this person 2 minutes ago. So let's see how that goes. And to a fault, my empathy is very strong, because I can literally think of some of the people who make very poor choices in the world, as I say to my children, because there's no good and bad people, there's only good and bad choices. And I can be like, yeah, but like what got them to that space? Why are they making those choices? And like start to ask all those questions. And
it's interesting because it was a Brene Brown podcast, actually. There's a guy called David Kessler, who's like a grief expert, who is one of my heroes, I would say. And it was a podcast he did with Brene Brown, and he said these words: judgment demands punishment. And it's a simple sentence, but it really hit me because, you know, whether you're judging yourself or you're judging other people, there's only punishment going on. You know, that it's not good for anybody.
Exactly. And like you say, yourself as well as other people. And I think like this is the time to be talking about that, because with all of the different opinions on some world topics around vaccines and around a variety of things like politics and stuff, there's so much divisiveness right now. And therefore we're demanding punishment. And is that the world we want to live in, really? And the only way to, and like we all do it, right? I'll be like, I'll see something that, I'll see something and I'll get a judgment about it, very strong judgment about something that I believe, and I won't get into it because I don't want to do like politics on here, but, and then I'll catch myself judging that person. I'm like, no, what are you doing? They're just stating a belief which came about based on their experiences. right?
Right. So you have to consider that if you had had their upbringing and their circumstances and everything that goes along with a life, whether you would be the same.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's my reminder to myself and everybody else to like notice the judgment and question the judgments that we all have about ourselves and about others right now, for sure. And that thing about punishment, like, do we want to punish ourselves? Like, that's what you're doing every time you judge yourself? No, it's not going to make you any happier. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us now about your business that you're building and how you promote wellness in other people. I'd love to hear what you're up to.
Sure. So the business I'm building is called Permission to be Human, which I just love the name of every time I say. And in fact, there's a free download of a permission slip on my website.
Okay.
So because people, so often what happens is like, we don't give ourselves permission to dream, to be silly, to feel, to like go do something that we've always wanted to. Anyway, so that's Permission to be Human is the company. And I work with mums who have put a part of themselves on pause, and they're ready. They've always had this dream of creating a project or a business or something that's really purposeful for them and making a positive impact on the world. And yet they just don't even know how to go about it anymore, because all of the things we just talked about have been ingrained in them, plus the, like, in addition to all the mumness of it, right? So we've got the practicalities of mums, but also the shoulds and the stories and the everything that goes around that. So so I'm building a membership which launches on Thursday. Nobody knows about it yet. And it is a space to build a community of mums where they have permission to be human. And they build all this I do this with my hands, because in my mind, my visual is a tree, okay, and with roots underneath. And you start with like not very many roots, right? And you're kind of trying to do it all on your own, and you're struggling and don't have all the resilience skills that we've been talking about yet. And then we connect with other people and we start to intertwine all of our roots, and we gain all of the skills of resilience and positive psychology and connection and support and belief and everything that goes with it that we've talked about. And we support each other, and we've become this beautiful grove of mums who can flourish as humans. And while we flourish, we're then able to flourish in our business, because when it falls, we can pick it back up. We're able to flourish as mums because we stop judging ourselves as much. And we just generally are in a better mood if we've got all these skills and are flourishing more. So that's what we're doing, is connecting people together, learning the skills and practicing them together so that we can be the best version of ourselves in whatever routes we end up going in our lives.
Awesome. Yeah. So what mode does that take? Is that kind of like you come together, group kind of coaching, group workshops, live?
Yeah. So it's I have a gazillion million ideas in answer to that question. Okay. And what I'm launching on Thursday is actually a founding member launch. And the point of that is to get a select few people into it that can look at my ideas and move them and tell me what they want to do. They're like, yeah, let's try that, or let's try this. But some of those are group coaching. So I actually just did a 6-week beta program with 3 mums doing group coaching, which was all about, we called it Shift the Shoulds. So it was all about really doing that and moving those stories to a place that is serving us more. So there'll be a group coaching element. There'll be a course that we're developing in order to have everybody be on the same kind of a foundation knowledge of the language and the kind of base knowledge of things, so that then we can dig deeper together. I've got this crazy idea of a possibility playground where people can bring their ideas and like basically ideas aren't built in a room by yourself, which is what most of us try to do right now. So we bring it and we talk about it, and we have playful activities which allow us to experiment with those ideas and explore them and grow them and adapt them and see what people think and validate them in a very playful way. And then we'll see what else happens, just some kind of more playful chat type things and an online space to be able to speak in between. Hopefully some sharing of knowledge. Like what I don't want, like at first I'll be likely sharing most of my knowledge with people, but what I really dream of is every member who's part of it bringing their knowledge, experience, and skills into the room and adding to it, so that it's a collaborative approach to things, and we all feel like we're giving and taking. So
yeah, I like that.
Vision.
So is that cross time zones and countries, or is that kind of like a
yeah, it's worldwide, and we'll figure out the in-betweens as that happens, is what I would say. But we definitely had someone from the UK on my group coaching. Recent one is just, it's morning here, it's evening there. It tends to work. Slightly trickier when you get into like Australia or New Zealand or something, but it's still feasible for some. So yeah, it's going to be, the world is a small place now that the internet is so prevalent.
Absolutely. So how can people connect with you? What's your details? Tell everybody.
So the easiest way to find me is to go to Permission to Be Human Coaching, I believe it officially is, on Facebook. That's my business profile. We've got a group on there that's totally free as well, that's building up, and we'll have lots of tips and tools in there as well. I accept friends on Facebook if you just want to put it on there, Mel later. And I do have a permissiontobehuman.ca, which is the Canadian ending on things website, if you want to pop on there. It's being updated kind of as we go, but there will be some free resources on there that people can grab a hold of, such as a permission slip to put on your wall and say, oh yeah, I do have permission to do that. I need to stop asking.
I'm going to download that. Yeah. Because I'm excited how this is going to grow. Actually, I'm really excited to watch your journey, because everything you've done in the past, has been amazing, and especially I think that you've got a special kind of skill in that community building. So I can already imagine that the community you're going to bring together is going to be like a special place.
Oh, thank you. I hope so. That's definitely the vision. And I think I think it just comes down to my belief that community is the heart of it all, honestly, especially right now. We're feeling so disconnected in the world. What we need is connection. Others, self, you need both to get both, essentially. What's like a top tip to help people connect with themselves? Like, if you were going to choose one thing for someone to do, connect a bit deeper within, what would you advise? Good question. It's a really simple one, and probably overstated, but really important. And I think that's just breath. Okay. And that forces us to take a moment. And we can't claim we don't have time. We all have to breathe, right? And even the busiest of us can take like 5 seconds to take a few deep breaths. Well, more like 30 seconds to take a few deep breaths. And to allow ourselves to just be in that moment. So I think the tip is around, whether that be through breath, whether that be through journaling, whether that be through a compassion shower, whether that be through a walk in the woods, because nature has so many things for us. Whatever the method is, the point is find some space to be. Don't try to do more, just find some space to be. And when we be, when we let ourselves be, we notice and we bring in all that awareness that we talked about before. We just notice how we are and be like, oh, that's interesting, without judgment. That's interesting that I'm feeling like a tension in my chest right now. Just no judgment attached. That's interesting. And just let yourself be in that moment. Yeah, that would be my top tip to connect.
Cool. Okay, so the very last question, which everybody gets, is can you please name a value or a strength or a personality trait that is really prominent within you that you use in a positive way towards your wellness?
Well, I think it relates to the last thing we just said, actually. So I'm a big fan of strengths finders and the various tools available. I think that if we focus on our strengths, it would be a whole different world. And so one of them, which is the one recommended by Positive Psychology because it's science backed, they've done various testing. It's called VIA character strengths. It's VIA character strengths. So one of my top ones is awe, and I think they have another word for it as well, depending on what year you look at. But awe is, for me, something that I never knew I had a strength until I started noticing recently and could put a name to. And I think it's the reason I moved to Vancouver Island, like why I chose here instead of Vancouver or wherever, and specifically where our house is, because we're surrounded by, like, my daughter thinks of it as an enchanted forest, right? So we have a forest around us, we have a lake 5 minutes away, we have the ocean 15 minutes away, and it's so beautiful in nature. And for me, it shows up. I go outside and I notice. I just notice things, and I'll be walking along and I'll just see something and I'll be in awe of how amazing it is that that's possible, or how beautiful something is. And I always want to have a camera with me because I want to take a picture or something, but I can never catch it in the moment. That is that awe. So I don't necessarily, but that's almost what I do in my brain, is take a picture of this moment of awe that I have. And it's the reason it helps my wellness is related to the last tool and tip that we gave, which is it allows me to be and allows me to savor where I am in that moment, which is the perfect balance for my typical mind that likes to, like, challenge and push and grow and all those things that go alongside it. It's a space to, like, just step back and be. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. It's been awesome to talk to you, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Very welcome. My pleasure.